New Year's Eve. The city shimmered with lights, a symphony of celebrations echoing through the streets. Yet, in the penthouse perched high above it all, Ethan Carter sat alone. His gaze drifted over the bustling avenues below, his expression unreadable. As a renowned architect, Ethan had everything most people dream of: fame, fortune, and success. But tonight, the lavish surroundings of his home only amplified the emptiness inside him. A glass of untouched whiskey sat on the table next to him, and his phone lay silent for the most part. He had declined every invitation to parties and gatherings, citing work as an excuse. In truth, he simply couldn't find the desire. The glittering events, the shallow connections, they did nothing to fill the void he had grown so used to carrying. Then, breaking through the stillness of the night, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, seeing an unfamiliar number. His first instinct was to ignore it, but the persistent vibration wore him down. He finally picked it up. "Hello?" he answered, his tone curt and weary. "This is Nurse Stevens from St. Mary's Hospital." A female voice spoke, urgent and steady. "Am I speaking with Ethan Carter? I'm sorry to disturb you, but you need to come immediately. Your child has just been born." The words struck Ethan like a thunderbolt, leaving him paralyzed. His mind raced, grappling with the sheer absurdity of what he had just heard. It couldn't be true. Could it? "My child," Ethan stammered, his voice laced with disbelief. "You must have the wrong person. I don't have a child." The nurse's tone remained steady and serious. "No, Mr. Carter, the mother listed you by name. She passed away during childbirth." The words hit Ethan like a freight train, leaving him stunned. "Who's the mother?" he asked, his voice sharp as he tried to grasp some sense of reason in the chaos. "Sophia Bennett," the nurse replied after a brief pause. The name stopped him cold. Sophia, a name he hadn't thought about in years. They had dated briefly, a whirlwind romance that ended amicably, or so he thought. Sophia had always been warm, creative, and so unlike anyone else in his life, but Ethan had been too consumed by his ambitions to let her in. "This can't be right," he said, denial thick in his voice. "If this were true, Sophia would have told me. She wouldn't have kept something like this from me." "She didn't have the time," the nurse replied gently, her tone tinged with sympathy. "But she made it clear you are the father, Mr. Carter. We need you to come to the hospital. The baby needs you." Ethan sank back into his chair, the world around him tilting. A baby? His child? How was that even possible? He had spent his life building walls, avoiding entanglements, and now, out of nowhere, he was being thrust into a reality he couldn't comprehend. After a long pause, he exhaled deeply and said, his voice heavy with reluctance, "Fine, I'll be there." Ethan stepped into St. Mary's Hospital, feeling as though the world around him had faded into a blur. The cold fluorescent lights and sharp scent of antiseptic greeted him as he walked through the quiet corridors. A nurse approached him, her expression gentle yet firm. "Are you Ethan Carter?" she asked softly. He nodded, his throat dry. "Yes, that's me." "Follow me, please," she said, leading him down a series of narrow hallways. Finally, they arrived at a small, quiet office. The nurse handed him a sealed envelope. "This is from Sophia," she said, her tone filled with sympathy. "She wanted you to have it if anything happened to her." Ethan stared at the envelope, his name written in Sophia's familiar handwriting. For a moment, he couldn't move, his hands trembling as he finally reached out to take it. The nurse stepped out, leaving him alone. He broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The words leapt off the page. "Ethan, if you're reading this, then I'm no longer here. Writing these words feels surreal, but I knew I had to prepare for this possibility. There's so much I want to say, but I'll try to keep it brief. First, I want you to know that I didn't keep our child from you out of spite. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to burden you. I saw the weight you carried, the work you were building, and I thought sharing this news might make things harder for you. But as I carried Amelia, I realized how wrong I was. I thought about you every day, Ethan. I thought about your kindness, the passion you poured into what you cared about. and the man I glimpsed. The one capable of loving deeply, even if he didn't realize it himself. Her name is Amelia. I chose it because it means joy in some languages, and I want her to have a life full of happiness and laughter. But she also needs stability, love, and someone to guide her. That's why I named you. Please take care of Amelia, Ethan. She's part of you, part of us, and I believe she'll be the best thing that ever happens to you. With all my love, Sophia. Ethan lowered the letter, his chest tightening as though an invisible hand was squeezing his heart. He couldn't remember the last time he had cried. Perhaps he never had. But now, tears welled up uncontrollably, each word from Sophia breaking down the walls he had spent years building. Sophia's words echoed in his mind, each one piercing deeper into his heart. Ethan stepped into the neonatal unit, where soft lights illuminated rows of tiny cribs. The air was filled with the sterile scent of the hospital, and the only sound was the faint hum of machines. A nurse guided him to a large window and pointed to a corner of the room. "That's Amelia," she said, a gentle smile on her face. Ethan moved closer, his eyes locking onto the tiny figure lying peacefully in her crib. She was swaddled in a pink blanket, her delicate features framed by a soft curl of black hair. Amelia lay still, her breathing steady, blissfully unaware of the world around her. A wave of emotion surged through Ethan. He couldn't look away. How is this possible?" he murmured, his voice thick with disbelief. "You can hold her if you'd like," the nurse offered, noticing his hesitation. Ethan faltered. "I don't know how." "That's okay," she reassured him. "I'll show you." Minutes later, Ethan found himself sitting in a rocking chair with Amelia in his arms. As her tiny fingers curled around his, a flood of emotions surged through him. Fear, wonder, and a strange, unfamiliar warmth. It was as though in that instant, his carefully constructed world had shifted, making space for something new. The nurse gently placed her in his grasp, adjusting his hold to make sure she was comfortable. Amelia was so tiny, so impossibly light, yet the weight of holding her felt immense. She stirred slightly, her tiny hand peeking out from the blanket. Ethan stared at her hand, hesitant, before reaching out with his own finger. When her small fingers wrapped around his chest tightened, an unfamiliar sensation washing over him. "She's perfect," he whispered, his voice trembling. He traced her tiny fingers with his eyes, marveling at how someone so small could already feel so monumental. The nurse smiled. "She's been waiting for you, Mr. Carter." In that moment, the denial, doubt, and fear that had gripped Ethan began to fade. A part of him, small but undeniable, felt the flicker of a new connection. A fragile spark of hope amidst the chaos. Bringing Amelia home was nothing short of a crash course in chaos for Ethan. The once quiet, meticulously organized penthouse was now filled with cries, dirty diapers, and clutter. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt completely out of his depth. The first night was a nightmare. Amelia cried endlessly and, despite following every instruction the nurse had given him, how to hold her, feed her, and soothe her, nothing seemed to work. He found himself sitting on the living room floor, a bottle in hand, barely holding back tears. "How am I supposed to do this?" he whispered. The bottle in his trembling hands felt heavier than it should, a physical manifestation of the doubts weighing him down. For years, he had mastered blueprints and grand designs. But this tiny, fragile life felt like a challenge far beyond his capabilities. The weight of his inadequacy pressed down on him, heavier than he had ever felt before. The next morning, his younger sister Rachel showed up. She walked into the apartment, took one look around, and laughed. "Ethan, what on earth are you doing? This isn't a blueprint you can perfect." Rachel quickly got to work, her natural ease cutting through the tension in the room. "You've got this all wrong," she teased, rolling up her sleeves. "Babies aren't blueprints, Ethan. You can't control every detail." Her light-hearted tone brought a small, reluctant smile to Ethan's face. As she showed him how to swaddle Amelia and recognize her cries, Rachel shared stories of her own chaotic days as a new mom, making him laugh despite himself. She showed him how to change diapers properly, how to recognize Amelia's cries, and how to swaddle her for sleep. With her help, things started to feel slightly less overwhelming. Still, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was an outsider in his own daughter's life. Karen, the nanny he hired, cared for Amelia with practiced ease. Every time Ethan saw her cradling the baby, he felt a pang of inadequacy. "I'm not a good father," Ethan confessed to Rachel one evening after Amelia had fallen asleep. "I don't know what I'm doing." Rachel looked at him with a kind, steady gaze. "You're doing your best, and Amelia knows that. You'll get better with time, Ethan. Just don't give up." Her words stuck with him. Determined to be more involved, Ethan made a conscious effort to take charge. He began waking up in the middle of the night to tend to Amelia, even if it meant fumbling with the bottle or spending an hour trying to get her back to sleep. He learned to distinguish her cries, the hungry wails, the tired whimpers, and the desperate sobs for comfort. Slowly but surely, Ethan started to find a rhythm in his role as a father. One afternoon, as Amelia napped on his chest, her tiny breaths rising and falling in sync with his, Ethan felt a peace he had never known before. "You changed everything," he thought, gently brushing his fingers over her soft curls. On a quiet autumn afternoon, Ethan carried Amelia to visit Sophia's grave for the first time. The cemetery stretched out before him, rows of towering trees casting long shadows over the stone paths. Gentle sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating a serene yet somber atmosphere. Amelia was wrapped snugly in a warm sweater, her wide, curious eyes taking in the world around her. Ethan walked slowly, each step pulling him deeper into memories of Sophia. Finally, he stopped in front of a simple gravestone bearing her name, Sophia Bennett. He stood silently for a few moments, unsure of where to begin. Amelia stirred slightly in his arms, as if reminding him of her presence. Ethan exhaled deeply, looked down at his daughter, and then knelt beside the grave. "Sophia," he began, his voice trembling as tears threatened to fall. "I failed you. I wasn't there when you needed me, and I don't know if I can ever make that right. But Amelia, she's incredible, Sophia. She's everything, and I'll do my best to give her the life you wanted for her." He reached out, his hand brushing gently over the smooth surface of the gravestone. "Amelia is incredible, Sophia. You were right about her. She's the most beautiful thing that's ever happened to me. And you were right about me too. I wasn't ready. But I'm trying. For her." Amelia let out a soft giggle, her small laugh breaking the stillness of the air. Ethan couldn't help but smile. He looked into her eyes, and for a moment, he saw the same warmth and love that Sophia had once brought into his life. "I promise," Ethan continued, his voice steadier now, "I'll take care of her. I'll tell her about you, about your kindness, your strength, and your love. She'll know how amazing you were." He placed a hand gently on the gravestone, the cold surface grounding him in the moment. A breeze rustled the trees, carrying with it the faintest scent of wildflowers, just like the ones Sophia had loved. For a brief moment, he felt as though she was there, her presence reassuring him that he was on the right path. A gentle breeze swept through the trees, rustling the leaves. Ethan felt an inexplicable sense of peace, as if Sophia was somehow there, smiling at him from afar. He kissed Amelia's forehead before rising to his feet. "Thank you, Sophia. Thank you for believing in me." As he left the cemetery, Amelia drifted off to sleep in his arms. Though the ache of loss remained, Ethan felt a newfound sense of calm, a quiet determination to honor Sophia's memory by being the father Amelia deserved. A year had passed since the New Year's Eve that changed Ethan's life forever. He stood by the window of his penthouse, watching the city's night sky light up with fireworks. But tonight, the view didn't feel lonely anymore. The once cold and sterile apartment had transformed into a true home. The living room was alive with color, scattered with Amelia's toys, and the walls were adorned with photos capturing her early milestones. In the corner stood a rocking chair, a spot where Ethan had spent countless hours lulling Amelia to sleep. Amelia, now a bright and bubbly 1-year-old, sat on the rug nearby, giggling as she played with colorful wooden blocks. Her laughter filled the room with a warmth Ethan hadn't known was possible. He knelt beside her, smiling as she carefully built a small tower, only to gleefully knock it down moments later. "You've changed everything, Amelia," Ethan said softly, his voice tinged with emotion. "You've given me a reason to live, a reason to try." "You've changed everything, Amelia," Ethan said softly, his voice trembling with a mix of gratitude and awe. "I thought I had everything, but I didn't realize how empty it all was until you came into my life." The dining room was lit with string lights, the table set simply but thoughtfully. Amelia, the star of the night, toddled around in an adorable floral dress Rachel had picked out, charming everyone with her toothy grins and curious gaze. As the gathering wound down, Rachel stood and raised a glass, her smile brimming with pride. "I want to toast to Ethan," she said, her voice filled with affection. "For finding joy in the unexpected, for embracing fatherhood with an open heart, and for showing us all that second chances can lead to the most beautiful things." Applause erupted. Ethan looked at Amelia, who was happily trying to grab a piece of cake from his plate, and chuckled. He lifted his own glass. "To Amelia," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for teaching me what it truly means to live." The evening ended in laughter and warmth. Later that night, Ethan sat beside Amelia's crib as she slept peacefully. He gazed at her tiny, serene face, his heart brimming with love. "Thank you, Amelia," he whispered, "for finding me, for giving me a new life." As the soft morning light streamed through the windows, Ethan sat at his desk, quietly reading Sophia's letter. The familiar handwriting still held a profound power, reminding him that his journey was just beginning. Inspired by Sophia and the love she had for Amelia, Ethan decided to establish a foundation in her name. The foundation would support single parents and children in need, offering financial aid, childcare services, and job training programs. At the foundation's launch event, Ethan stood on stage with Amelia in his arms. The audience was a mix of friends, colleagues, and families who would benefit from the foundation's work. His heart raced, not with nerves, but with pride. "This foundation is more than just a name," Ethan began, his voice filled with emotion. "It's a promise to carry forward Sophia's spirit of love, resilience, and hope, even in the face of hardship. She believed in people, in the power of kindness and second chances, and I want this foundation to reflect that belief." He glanced at Amelia, her tiny hands playing with the edge of his shirt. "And this is also for my daughter, Amelia. She's shown me that even in the darkest moments, there's always light if we're willing to look for it. She was someone who inspired us all, and this is how I honor her." He glanced down at Amelia, who was playfully tugging at the microphone cord, blissfully unaware of the moment's significance. "And this," Ethan continued, his voice softening, "is for my daughter, Amelia. She has taught me the importance of family, of connection, and of creating a world where every child has a chance to thrive." The audience rose to their feet, applauding, and Ethan felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This was not just a way to honor Sophia, but also to build a legacy that Amelia could one day be proud of. That night, as he tucked Amelia into her crib and kissed her forehead, Ethan whispered, "We're building something beautiful, Amelia," he murmured, his voice a mix of tenderness and resolve. "For you, for your mom, and for every soul out there searching for hope. You've given me the greatest gift, a chance to start over, and I won't waste it." Amelia stirred slightly in her sleep, her tiny hands reaching out, as if trying to grasp his words. Ethan smiled, feeling for the first time in his life that he was exactly where he was meant to be.